There's a street in Austria named after a Wehrmacht officer. The French supported naming it. They supported it because he died defending French prisoners from the SS alongside Americans in a castle in the last 4 days of World War II. Every single word of that is true, and it only gets stranger from here. Castle Itter, May 1945, a medieval fortress on a limestone cliff in the Austrian Alps. Inside, 14 of the most prominent French prisoners in Nazi custody. Former prime ministers, a general, a Wimbledon champion, Charles de Gaulle's older sister, people the Reich considered too famous to execute and too dangerous to release. On May 3rd, their guards left, just drove away. No orders, no handover. The command structure holding the Third Reich together had stopped functioning, and the men at the gate made their own calculation and disappeared down the valley road. Which sounds like freedom. It was not. Because SS units were still roaming the Austrian countryside, still executing deserters, still hunting anyone who tried to surrender. And they had standing orders that said high-value prisoners were not to be taken alive if liberation appeared imminent. The prisoners knew those orders existed. They had known for weeks. They had watched the war get closer through narrow medieval windows and understood exactly what the timing meant. The question was not whether the SS would come. It was whether anyone would get there first. His name was Josef Gangl, Wehrmacht major, 43 years old. Most tellings treat him as a plot device. He was not. He was a decorated officer who had fought on the Eastern Front, watched what the Reich was doing to the people it conquered across 4 years of total war, and made a private decision sometime in late 1944 that would have gotten him executed if anyone found out. He had been working with the Austrian resistance for months, passing intelligence to Allied forces, sheltering defectors, maintaining his uniform and his rank as cover, while actively undermining the machine he was still technically serving. Think about what that actually meant as a daily reality. Every conversation with a superior officer was a performance. Every order he received had to be evaluated. Follow it, stall it, or quietly make it disappear. Not for a week, for months, in a war zone. While the SS was executing defeatists 2 valleys over. One wrong word to the wrong person, and there would be no trial. Just a wall and a firing squad. That is not a footnote. That is a man carrying an impossible weight and not putting it down. By May 4th, Gangl was in Virgil when a Yugoslav handyman named Andreas Krobot arrived on a bicycle with news about the castle. 14 prisoners. No guards. SS closing in from the east. Gangl sent Krobot ahead to find the Americans and started assembling whoever would come. A handful of Wehrmacht soldiers who had made their own quiet decisions, some Austrian resistance fighters, a few armed civilians, willing to spend one more night at war. Then, he went to find the Americans himself. Captain John Lee commanded a small task force from the 12th Armored Division near Kufstein. 14 soldiers, 1 Sherman tank, 75mm main gun. His crew had named Besotten Jenny. A radio that worked sometimes. His orders were clear. Hold position. Await instructions. He had no authorization for a rescue mission 14 kilometers, nearly 9 miles, behind enemy lines alongside Wehrmacht troops. No precedent. No guarantee this was not a trap. He had also spent the past month liberating concentration camps. He knew what the SS did when they had time and no one was watching. He said yes. The column that rolled toward Castle Itter on the evening of May 4th had never existed before in this war and would never exist again. American soldiers, Wehrmacht infantry, Austrian resistance fighters, 1 tank, no air support, no reinforcements on standby, no clear answer to what happened if the SS got there first. They reached the castle just before midnight. The prisoners met them in the courtyard. Former prime ministers, a general of 78, a Wimbledon champion who looked at American soldiers climbing out of vehicles alongside Wehrmacht troops and laughed. Daladier stared and said something to the effect of, "Well, it's about time." Lee set his perimeter. Wehrmacht soldiers on the east wall, the Sherman blocking the access road, the French prisoners, men who had commanded armies and signed treaties, grabbed rifles and moved to windows. One of Lee's men looked at a German soldier standing next to him at a firing position and said, "This is the weirdest damn thing I have ever done." The German nodded. Lee tried the radio, no response. Dead. They were 14 kilometers, nearly 9 miles, from friendly lines with no communication, and 6 hours until dawn. At 0400 hours, the SS attacked. Between 100 and 150, Waffen SS troops moved up through the forest. Not following orders from a functioning command, there was no functioning command anymore. These men were choosing this. In the final 72 hours of the Third Reich, with Germany surrendering in pieces across every front, they were still climbing a mountain in Austria to execute 14 elderly civilians because the ideology demanded it. Not strategy, not military necessity. Pure ideological momentum. A machine still running after the people operating it were dead or gone. That is what Lee and Gangl were defending against. Not soldiers following a chain of command. True believers with nothing left to lose and no reason to stop. The return fire came in 2 languages. Besatt and Jenny held the main road, 42 rounds before the barrel overheated. A Panzerfaust team, 149mm rocket, just under 6 inches of shaped charge, worked their way to within 60 meters, about 65 yards. First shot missed, blew a chunk out of the stone rampart behind the tank. Second shot clipped the track assembly. The Sherman was finished. The crew bailed out, grabbed their rifles, and fell back inside the gate. No armor, no heavy weapon. SS troops inside the outer courtyard now. Grenades coming over the wall. Lee pulled everyone back to the inner keep. Americans and Germans firing from the same windows, calling targets in 2 languages, passing ammunition across what had been the front line of the entire war 6 days ago. The medieval stone walls did exactly what they were built to do 8 centuries earlier. They held, but ammunition was running low, and the SS were not stopping. At 10:47 hours, Gangl moved to a second-floor window. He had spotted an SS machine gun position that was bracketing the courtyard. If someone did not redirect fire onto it in the next few minutes, people were going to die down there. A single shot came through the window. He dropped. He did not get back up. The man who spent months risking execution to undermine his own regime, who drove alone to find the Americans, who organized an impossible defense with 2 armies that had never trained together and had every reason not to trust each other, killed by his own countrymen, in a battle that would not have happened if the war had ended 1 week earlier. One of the French prisoners knelt beside him and closed his eyes. The firing continued. Earlier that morning, Jean Barotra had made an offer. He would go over the wall, sprint through enemy fire, and run 14 kilometers, nearly 9 miles, to bring back the reinforcements the dead radio could not reach. He was 60 years old, dress shirt, 5 years of captivity behind him. Lee told him it was insane. Barotra went anyway. He made it. The relief column from the 142nd Infantry Regiment was already moving. They hit the SS from the rear. The SS broke contact and scattered into the forest. By 16:30 hours, it was over. 14 prisoners walked out alive. Germany surrendered 2 days later, which means the Wehrmacht soldiers who fought alongside Americans at Castle Itter spent the final 48 hours of the war as enemies again, processed as POWs, standard procedure, by the book. 3 days earlier, they had been sharing ammunition with the men now guarding them. The U.S. Army After Action Report describes it as a defensive action involving local auxiliary forces. That phrase appears exactly once in 6 years of U.S. Army records across every theater of the war. Once. Because nothing like it had ever happened before. Gangl was buried with military honors in Wörgl. They named a street after him, a Wehrmacht officer, honored by the town his army had occupied. The French prisoners went home. Most returned to politics. Baratra played Wimbledon again and lived to 95. When asked why he ran through enemy fire in a dress shirt, he said, "It needed doing." That was it. No philosophy, no drama. The castle still stands. Near the entrance, there's a plaque listing the names of the defenders. American names, German names, French names, all on the same stone. Here's what I want you to think about. The SS troops who attacked that morning were not following orders. There were no orders, no Reich left to give them. They chose to climb that mountain because the ideology told them to. A machine still running after the people operating it were gone. That is the cause of everything that happened on that hill. Not military strategy, ideological gravity. And the consequence of that ideology, reaching the castle uncontested, without Gangl, without Lee, without a 60-year-old tennis player vaulting a wall in a dress shirt, was not just 14 deaths. Those 14 people were witnesses to the fall of France, to the decisions that shaped the war, to the truth of what happened in rooms where history was made. Losing them was not just 14 deaths. It was the erasure of 14 voices post-war Europe needed to hear. That is the significance of a battle that lasted one day in a war that lasted 6 years. It did not change the outcome. It preserved the memory of how it happened. And sometimes, that is the most important thing there is to defend. Gangl died, holding a wall that was not his to hold. He held it anyway. If this is the history you want, not the version in the textbook, but the version that is true and refuses to be simple, subscribe. We are here every week. And if your family has any connection to this story, the 12th Armored, the Austrian Resistance, the French prisoners who came home, drop it in the comments. Sometimes the comments hold things that are not in any archive.